Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me today as we finished up the Psalms. And we're just going to keep going straight on. We're going to go into the book of Proverbs. And I feel woefully, if I didn't feel inadequate going through the Psalms, I feel horribly inadequate tackling the great wisdom of Solomon. But we'll take a look at it. A lot of good principles for life there. One of the models I've always heard for good Bible reading for living is there's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, and read one chapter each day. First day, read the first chapter. Obviously, there'll be months when you don't get to the 31st chapter, and some when you don't even get to the 29th or the 30th or the 31st. But however many days, whatever the date is, read that chapter of the book of Proverbs. But we're going to begin today by just talking a little bit about the book itself before we actually begin into the text. May even have to do that tomorrow as well for time's sake. But the book of Proverbs, it begins with an explanation of what it is and why it is compiled. That it is a compilation of the wisdom and instruction, if you see in verse 2, of Solomon. That these words were gathered together as some basic principles of living, and those words are again a summary. Really, truthfully, the first probably 8 or 9 verses are really a summary of the purpose of the entire book. And this small book is a compilation again of Solomon's wisdom for many of the problems of life. You can go into the bookstore, or go into Amazon today rather than a bookstore, and you can find books and how-to books, and one of the popular series is the For Dummies series. That parenting for dummies, fixing your computer for dummies, all that series. Well, Proverbs was the original version. If you want to know how to be a husband, be a father, be an employee, be an employer, you can find principles in this book on how to do that, how to be happy, how to be rich. You can find pretty much any how-to book that you desire can be found in this little book. It is really a how-to book of being happy, a how-to book of successful living, a how-to book on making good decisions. The only difference is all those other how-to books were men's opinion. This is inspired by God Himself. Now, the book itself, one of the interesting things about the book is that even though these are the Proverbs of Solomon, the book itself was really not in so many words written by Solomon. King Hezekiah called for the compilation. He asked his servants to put together the various proverbs, the various words of wisdom of Solomon. He had heard about them, and they'd been passed on through time. Pretty much every culture has little proverbs. We have things like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, that's a proverb. It is a general principle. It's not a fact. You can eat an apple every day, and you're probably still eventually going to get sick. But generally speaking, it is a lesson, and that's what a proverb is. And so these proverbs had been talked about and passed on, and Hezekiah asked his order, directed his servants to put these together. These are things that Solomon had noticed, observations that he had made in his life of watching how certain things played out. That if you do this, you can expect this. And so he had observed those things and had wrote those things down. And so one of the first questions we want to deal with is, what exactly is a proverb? A proverb comes from the Hebrew word. It has a couple of meanings. One of them is it means to be like or to compare. And what that does is a proverb generally highlights or shows us kind of two statements, two sides of a truth. And so Proverbs chapter 10 verse 20 says, the tongue of the just is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. And so you have kind of the comparison between the tongue of the just man and the heart of the wicked man. And a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. There'll be comparisons. They use images, words, stories to teach a principle of life. The word also means to govern. Proverbs are governing, are rules that are to govern life. They're God's rules, and they typically have a couple characteristics. They are usually short. They're not real long. They're very brief. They're kind of catchy little sayings, so that they're easy to remember. Many times they're statements that make us a little uncomfortable. They're very blunt. They are educational. They are the kinds of statements that are they've been used a lot. They've been repeated, and one of the primary things that we need to understand about Proverbs that is very difficult for some people and causes some people a great deal of confusion and problems in reading and understanding the Proverbs is that Proverbs usually express a general truth, and many people have become very upset, very confused because they didn't understand that last principle. And as we go through the book of Proverbs, you're going to see there are some general principles. And the difference is they are not promises, they are principles. Again, I used the earthly principle, the earthly proverb, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, none of us really think that if we eat an apple a day, we'll never need a doctor. But in general, if we eat apples, we'll probably be a little more healthy. And so Proverbs, Warren Wiersbe, great commentator, says that Proverbs are generalized statements that are usually true in life. They cannot be treated like promises. For example, Proverbs 15 says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath." Well, Most of the time it does. But you know, and I know that sometimes you can answer as softly and as nicely, just as gentle and calmly as possible, and the other person will still lose their mind. So this is a principle, not a promise, and it's extremely important that we keep that in mind in looking at the Proverbs. Proverbs 11:8 says, "The righteous man is rescued from trouble, and it comes on the wicked instead." Well, generally, that's true, but there are a number of people who have died for the Christian faith who would say that isn't a promise. It's a principle. Generally speaking, the righteous man is better off. And so, got to keep that in mind, and we'll expound on that some as we go through the various proverbs. One other thing that we've already seen in the first verse is then that Solomon is the author of the vast majority of the Proverbs. There are a few that came from somewhere else, but all of them were not by Solomon. As we wrap up this introduction, one of the sad things that we know by studying the life of Solomon is that while these are the Proverbs of Solomon, he didn't always live by his own Proverbs. He didn't always obey his own principles. He made plenty of foolish choices that don't seem to line up with a man who would write these great words. And so, as we finish up this introduction, just leave you with that thought that here are the principles, here are the guidelines. You and I, just like Solomon, we have a choice of whether or not we're going to use them to govern our life, to lead us through decision making and the choices that we make. And so that's just a general introduction. We'll jump into the first chapter tomorrow morning, and I look forward to going through the book of Proverbs with you, and be a little bit of a change from the book of Psalms. And look forward, went a little long today, and hope to keep these really brief as we go through Proverbs. But this was an introduction, and so we'll jump into the text tomorrow morning. Have a great day. We'll see you back here in the morning.